I hesitate to distinguish between the experience of the Syrian Armenians and the experience of Syrians in general. First, because it would be ahistorical, and second, because it would be unfair to the Syrian Armenian community itself. In the decades following the Armenian Genocide, the Syrian Armenian community has very actively been part of the social, cultural, and even political life in Syria. And to dissociate that would be untrue and unfair. The devastation of the war in Syria has shattered the fabric of community life to such a profound extent that it is difficult to imagine a process that would bring back the Syria that existed before the war. And this, of course, will have an impact on the Armenian community as well. Regardless of when the war ends and what rebuilding and reconstruction effort is made, it is difficult to imagine a community in Syria that is very similar and identical in size and in scope to the Armenian community in Syria before the war. Aleppo was a very important hub for Armenian community life before the genocide, during the genocide, and even more importantly in the aftermath of the Armenian Genocide. But it also played an active role in the broader life of Syria, whether it's through its writers, whether it's through its music, it's the production and the cultural production, whether it's through its participation in the political life. 100 years ago, the Armenians of Syria, and particularly the Armenians of Aleppo, played a crucial role in saving thousands of Armenian children and Armenian deportees who ended up reconstituting the Armenian diaspora. And today, it is the Armenians of Syria, whether it's the Armenians of Aleppo or other parts of the country, that need the support and assistance of the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of these survivors. Thousands of Armenians have been forced to flee their homes in a place like Deir ez-Zor, which is considered to be the Auschwitz of the Armenian Genocide, a place where 100 years ago, hundreds of thousands of Armenians were killed. And then an Armenian community was reconstituted, and an Armenian Genocide Memorial was built. Today, there are no Armenians. The Armenian Genocide Memorial is destroyed. In places like Aleppo, a sizable proportion of the Armenian community has left. Many are in Armenia, several thousand are in Lebanon, and many are moving to Europe and Canada from Armenia and Lebanon. In places like Kesab, the Armenian community has been forced to evacuate the city. And this has a significant impact beyond the borders of Syria. Aleppo was and has been for the longest time a mother community. It has been a community that has provided the intellectuals, the teachers, the editors, the writers, the leaders of the Armenian diaspora, whether it's in the Middle East or beyond. And the impact that the war has had on the Armenian community in Syria is necessarily an impact that will be felt well beyond the borders of Syria, all over the world in Armenian communities. And which is why it is important to constantly think about the day after, to realize that in our lives, in the life of the Armenian diaspora, a life without Aleppo would be a mistake. A life without Aleppo would be even an impossibility. Because if the experience of the genocide can teach us anything, it is that there are certain geographic locations that are so closely and intricately tied to the Armenian psyche and the Armenians' will to rebuild and to revive itself and to reconstitute itself. That, and Aleppo is one of those places, if not probably the most prominent of those places, that it's difficult to imagine an Armenian diaspora that is not looking towards Aleppo as for nourishment, for cultural nourishment, for education, and looking towards Aleppo to supply it with more leaders, with more intellectuals, with more writers, and also symbolically to remind it of the Armenians' ability to survive. If Syria is to revive, if Syria is to be rebuilt, it is going to be revived and rebuilt through the efforts of all its children, and the Armenians are an integral part of it.